You're watching Community Conversations, a ConcordTV production.
Hi there, I'm Jim Weber of ConcordTV. I'm very happy you're with us today watching this program of Community Conversations, a long-running program of ConcordTV. We're very lucky with this program today. We have a very unusual topic for us today on Community Conversations, and we're actually going to be talking about poetry, which is something that oftentimes people either discount, or it's not their thing, or they don't feel that it's accessible, or it's too complex, or it's written for experts or academic people. But today we have, if you fit into that category and have something that I guess I would call fear of poetry, I think we have the perfect person for you. This is a local author who is very well known in this region. He's an award-winning writer and a humorist, just such a creative poet, but I want you to discover that rather than me tell you. So I want to introduce a wonderful man named Glenn Currie. Glenn, we're so happy to have you today on Community Conversations.
It's a pleasure to be here. I love talking about poetry, but I also like to create poetry that relates to the real world and relates to people like ourselves. That's what I've been trying to do with my books, and I hope people will stick around and listen to it a little bit.
Good.
And enjoy it.
I think they will. You have a wonderful website, which we'll mention at the end, and you have a great blog on it as well, and I found some things out. So I'll be quoting some of your own words back to you.
That's fine.
Which you can feel however you wish about that. But something that really grabbed me right at the beginning was you said, most of us need a little poetry in our lives to open our hearts and let ourselves travel to places far from the hard edges of the world. He said, I hope you will let yourselves flow with the music, the insights, the humor, and discoveries that poetry can bring to people's lives. You said, we may need it in 2020. I was actually hoping to get away from a discussion of the real world, but you're actually very aware of how poetry may be something that is important to people today.
Well, the country is obviously divided, and people are very angry right now on both sides of the aisle. And I'm hoping that people will look to poetry as a way to kind of reconnect with each other. The topics that I've picked in my book are really an effort to deal with subjects that we all have at one time or another in our lives tried to deal with, and to show through that we're all connected. You know, it's not like we're that person and we have nothing in common. When you look at things, we have a lot in common, not only with ourselves, but with people all over the world. Emotions, the general human emotions are there, and that's one of the things that poetry tries to work with. And so I think if we understand how we're connected, that the ball of string, all the pieces that connect to make the world, that we maybe can reduce the animosity that everybody's feeling right now, and understand that while we may differ on some things, we're alike in so many other ways that we need to find a way to stay focused on those things and let the world kind of heal a little bit.
And the things that we have in common hopefully will be the direction that takes us there. You know,
I
to
hope
get to
so,
those
yeah.
things. Let's go right to it. If we could see, your book is actually called Ball of String. If we could see the cover, you have that on the, oh, there it is right on the screen, right there. And there's some wonderful children there. Look familiar to you, I think.
Those, I did all the photos in the book as well. And those, I was so lucky to catch that. I mean, you know, with kids.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
We were at one of these outdoor concerts at York Beach, where they have a little cabana or whatever. Yeah. And they play music, and there was a small band playing, and the kids people were sitting in chairs and listening to the music, and the kids were running all over the grass. And behind the beach at York Beach, it's a fantastic beach because they have all of these different things available, playgrounds, but they have a huge grass area, and the kids love to roll around and dance and play Frisbee and stuff. Well, these kids were doing dancing around
To the music, right? Yeah,
to the music, and I took this actually with my cell phone because I saw him and I said, "Man, that's a great picture." And
I like that they're all wearing sunglasses.
Yeah.
All three of them.
Well, this is
very funny.
It's about 6 o'clock at night,
Yeah.
but the sun's still sort of up.
It's very cute. Yeah.
But I took 6 or 7 shots, and this one got them all smiling, which is a miracle. These are my grandchildren,
Yes,
by the way. Yeah, they're all smiling. They're having a good time. They're connected like ball of string.
That's right. That's right.
They're showing something that they have in common right there. And so when I looked at it later, I said, "That's the perfect cover."
It
for
is,
the book.
exactly.
It's colorful.
Yeah.
It emphasizes how we connect to each other,
And the hope is, of course, with the younger people.
Yeah,
Not with
exactly.
us. It's with the younger people.
Well, it's with everybody.
It's everybody,
but,
I suppose.
But that's where you have to
Yes.
really make the connections.
Not to change the subject, but let's actually jump right into it and go right back to the theme. And if you could maybe read us that first poem in the
Sure.
book, which is called Ball of String.
Yeah. This actually won a first prize in a national contest as well. And the photo I have with it is York Beach has fireworks shows a couple of times a year. And I've found a way over many years to take some really interesting pictures. And this is a fireworks explosion, but it's sort of like Earth and the strings coming out of it, exactly. And I thought it went well with the poem. But the caption under it, I don't know if you can read it on there, is, "We are all connected on this earth, wrapped together by our genes and our place in the universe." And the poem, Ball of String. String from the old baseball, uncovered at the playground. Hanging from the top of the fence, climbed in too much haste. Around the finger, you can't remember why it's there. Pulled by the lobbyists, paid by the piece. Attached to promises made with a price. Cut from the apron of the anxious mother. Broken on the guitar of the street performer. Strung along the halls of failed schools. Thrown against the wall to see if it sticks. A theory to collect the pieces, all wrapped into a ball that unwinds as it spins around the sun.
Something for me that I notice, and this may not be true of other people, but in your poems, there's almost like one line that comes out and grabs me as it's either a little different or it's just, I don't know, it just jumps out at me. And a theory to collect the pieces is the one that comes out at me.
Yeah,
of this, because
obviously
so much is about unwinding.
Yeah.
And then you have that.
Obviously
But there's a
reference
little
to
bit.
string theory.
Yes. Yeah.
But
yeah.
The world goes around with strings, Can you pull some strings for me to do this? Or, I can do that for you, but it's going to cost you. There's a string
Yes,
to my favor.
attached.
And apron strings. I mean, they're all related in one way or another in our development and growth and the world we live in. But it's also, all of them are tied together in a way that's where we live. We live in amongst these strings that are put together as we're growing up and as we go through jobs and marriage and everything else. And so it seemed like a fitting tenet to go with at the beginning to emphasize a world where we are connected and how we're connected. And the poems in the book are all sort of in a chronological stage as I grew up and older and have lived a fairly long life at this point. And trying to hit on subjects that I found important in my growth from a baby basically on up. But as I look back, I realize how significant it was in my growth. And also I look at it as we've all shared most of these emotions. And so I'm trying to write things that people will say to themselves, I've been through that, or I had something similar, or they'll start thinking about events in their own lives that were kind of triggered by this. And the reactions I've got from people, the book's been out about 3 months now, and I get letters from people that really love the book, and they will reference poems in here that they said, the 3 that really related to me, and they're all different. It's interesting.
Yes.
You know, some that I said, wow, those are the ones that really came home to them.
And it's funny because in some obvious way, The Ball of String is a great thematic grouping for the whole collection of poems, but yet again, the subjects as we go on, they not only are different, you know, things that obviously were important to you, but yet they kind of develop a power of richness as the book goes along, you know. So they seem to be arbitrary, just different colored cards as you go along, but they're not. It really has an escalating arc to it, I noticed, you know.
Well, thank you.
So I didn't expect it, but it creeps up on you if you read it chronologically, you know. So that was just my reaction to it. Could you talk a little bit about your process of writing, how a poem comes to you, just an individual poem comes to you?
I'm happy to, because people think, well, you just sit down and you write a poem. And at least for me, and I think for most poets, it's not something you can force. Poetry, people talk about a muse or something that inspires you to write. With me, I can't just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a poem today. But I may wake up in the middle of the night and something's hit me, and I'll sit down and write it then. And of course, that's a draft. You know, you're just writing basically subject matter that you think links together. And I will go through, I'd say the average poem goes through at least 10 or 15 rewrites by the time you get to where you're going. And a lot of times when you get there, it's totally unrelated to where you started because it's an evolving process. And I'll sit sometimes and I'll look at a poem and I say, man, I love that, but I don't know where it came from. You know, this is what I started with. It just evolved.
Do you ever get a chunk of something rather than something complete? And if you do, do you feel frustrated that it's only a chunk and you didn't get something that's whole cloth?
I throw away a lot of poems.
All right.
They start off and I think I've got something, and then I don't have what I want.
I see. Yeah.
I mean, this took 10 years to put together because most of these poems were all written within the last 10 years, a couple earlier. But
there were 48 poems in this book. It's an amazing collection. You know, so it's a lot.
And
there,
a lot of them were prize winners. So curiously enough, which I didn't really start out doing it. But my wife, about I don't know, 5 years ago, said, "Why don't you send a couple of into some of these contests?"
Sure.
And I got a lot of hits out of it, which kind of surprised me because it's not what you think of as the classical poems that, you know, the college professors or whatever are going to be interested in. It's more relates. I've purposely tried to write to relate to real life. I try to put layers into them and things that when you read the poem several times, you come out with different stuff each time. But it's not like I'm trying to impress a college professor or something. That's not my objective.
And I think that's attractive to many readers. And what also, too, is that there aren't poems that go on for 5 pages. I mean, you basically turn a page, it's all on one page looking at you, and it may be, you know, 20 to 30 lines, but no more than that generally. And so your investment is only, you know, a limited. You're not going to, you know, you don't have to freak out for 20 minutes. You just have this in front of you, you know, and a picture, I think, to guide you. We'll get to that in a minute, but that helps, you know. Yeah.
The reason I don't try to go with these long poems, the culture now is 30 to 60 second increments or whatever. I don't want to overwhelm people with so many words that they don't want to read it because it's like in business. If you really want to make an effective business proposal, you keep it to 1 page.
That's right. Yeah.
And so my feeling is if I want people to sit down and actually, because you have to work a little bit with any poem. I mean, it draws you in, hopefully, but you don't want to make it such hard work that people look for the first person, they say, I have
Yes.
no idea what he's
Yeah,
saying, and
yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes that has happened in the past. I think that's why there's such a negative attitude towards poetry by a lot of people.
I think so too. Let's just jump right into Firefly. Can we do that? Firefly
Sure.
Wisdom? Okay. I think it's page 7 there.
Yes. And this, again, I write in a lot of different styles. I write mostly free verse, but I also write in prose. I write in rhyme. And early on in this book, I used 2 or 3 rhyme poems because I'm starting as a child, as the influences of my childhood, which were mostly rhyme poems. And it's easier to get kids interested in it if it does have a rhyme to it. I mean, to me, rhyme serves a couple of purposes. It appeals to a lot of different people, but it flows better. It's better with humor. I mean, there's certain styles of objective or certain objectives you're trying to accomplish where rhyme is the thing to use. I mean, humor is great with rhyme.
It's great. It's great at setting things up for a punch, or
and
something.
It flows so easily.
Yep.
So this is did the picture show
It
up?
will. I think as you're reading it will come up. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, this is another
Nope. There it is.
wonderful, I think, wonderful photo that came out of actually fireworks. And the caption I had under it is, "The other creatures of our planet are well advised to fear us and to wonder how we survive. Are we a brief curiosity in history, or will we finally achieve wisdom?" The elephant said to the firefly, "No one could be as strange as I. I dare dispute what you decry. My tail on fire, your claim belies. And though we both are odd, it's true, there's some more quaint than me and you. Birds that swim and put heads in the sand, fish that fly and walk on their hands. But upon the earth, the queerest, methinks, is the human creature, who should be extinct. He has no skills that I can tell, no wings to fly, no protective shell. Predators see him as a tasty treat, and he only runs on 2 of his feet. He has no claws to fend off foes, no fur to warm him when it snows. So keep perspective about your flaws. Don't let your appearance give you pause. Though often we be of bizarre depiction, there's one out there who is stranger than fiction."
Talking about accessibility, this is accessible to many ages. It's almost like a young person's poem. Doesn't have to be necessarily, you know. It also reminds me, this is strange, it just kind of hit me, was like maybe Kipling, you know, Rudyard Kipling.
Yeah, he wrote in rhyme all the time.
And also, you know, the elephant, the animals of the East, you know, which is very interesting.
Jungle Book.
So there you go, and Just So stories and all those things. So yeah, and the language has a kind of you know, methinks and it's like archaic, you know, whatever.
You try to use. I try to use a little unusual rhyming.
Right.
You know, rather than the easy
Standard.
words.
Yeah. Bump, bump, bump. Yeah. Exactly. And I think I noticed that quality in your work as well. There is not that your poems should be songs, but there's a musical weight to words, and I thought you had you just had to have a very good feeling for that. In that there's a rhythm. There's a rhythm to the way that the words seem laid out to me, anyway. You know, and sometimes that helps you through a poem, or I don't know. It gives you it creates a whole structure for each individual poem. That's all.
I think each style works for different purposes with different subjects.
Right.
And that's why I use them all, because I'm trying to fit the idea or the emotion with the words and format that will best relate to us.
Something that really hit me about your work too is it's extremely visual. You really kind of traffic in a lot of imagery, you know, and imagery and contrasting images and things. You know, some people that don't like poetry say like, well, why don't you just tell me what you mean rather than like beat around the bush, you know, whatever. But I think like quality film or photography or visual art, showing imagery allows people the option of their response coming from themselves rather than you telling them what to feel, you know. And their response to it kind of comes between the different images, between the lines, rather than someone pointing out to them, you should feel X, Y, Z.
That I try
know,
never to
so,
do that. In fact,
yeah.
I hate to try to explain poems to people because I want them to get out of it what they get out of it.
Right.
And, you know, I want them to read it and let it create their own emotions from it. If it's good, I think it does that a lot of the time.
Right, it's true. You mentioned something in addition to about being a writer and when you create new works, that a writer takes a risk by putting something out to an audience in public. And I think part of your process was showing first drafts of poems to certain groups of people and getting response from that. How does that work for you? And what are give me a good example and a bad one for you.
I actually don't show the drafts to others because it's such a work in progress. Now, when I've got something that I think is close to a finish, then I will show it to people and try to get feedback.
Okay.
And even with this book, I sent out a draft copy of it. All these people that wrote the reviews in the book, Rebecca Rule and Barbara Ball, they all saw a copy of the rough and had a chance to comment on it and tell me what they thought about it and agree. And, you know, I would ask them after they've seen it, would you be willing to write a review?
Sure,
and they all said yes. But the way I write is I put a poem together after sometimes years, sometimes months. Very rarely one will come together in a couple of weeks. But then once that comes together, then I search for a photo that'll go with it, because I'm trying to create an atmosphere where the photo and the poem blend together and sort of provide an entryway for the reader into the poem. And it's a color world now. I mean, people write poetry and they put it in black and white, or they don't put any photos with it. And those wind up, for the most part, in the back of the bookstore in a shelf that nobody looks at.
Right.
I mean, people like color in their world nowadays.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, there are young people I know that won't watch a black and white movie. You know. Speaking of black and white, can we go jump to your poem called Snow?
Oh,
you said a couple of winter poems we're going to do today.
Okay.
This is the first of those. I think it's page 41.
Yes. And this one is the picture I used with this one, since we're all living through this, is one of downtown Concord in one of its frequent snowstorms. Yeah, there it is. The caption under it is, we learn as school children to love snow, but sometimes the guest stays too long. And every spring, we're ready to get rid of it, but by about the middle of the summer, people are thinking, you know, snow's really pretty. You know, they may not be waiting for it to come back, but they're starting to appreciate it a little more. And a lot of times by November, they're ready for a little snow, and it gets old fast. So that's the basic message here. The thing about snow, it seduces you. For a brief time, it beguiles. In its virginal world, you can start over, making love to its innocence. A canvas for angels, clay for the sculptor, a body to explore, ammunition for schoolboys. But its charms grow old, and a fair gone bad, beauty too soon faded, soiled by the underworld. Spring's arrival marks a messy breakup, and then ex-lover regrets. That's the thing about snow.
What I like about that part is the short phrases that are kind of tumbling down at you as well, which is, you know, again,
like snow.
Like snow. There you go. And I like the format of that. That just kind of came at me when I was hearing it, and when I read it as well. So I appreciate that. We were talking about, just a minute ago, about different formats and things change with time and what people like. Skywriter has a lot to do with that as well. There's sort of a quality of the past and the devices of the past and the devices of the present. And I have a question about it, but I can't tell you until the end of that.
Okay.
So let's talk about Skywriter on
All right.
63.
It's sort of an autobiographical poem, actually.
Oh.
Because I'm like, a lot of people think I'm a dinosaur, you know, I'm 75 years old, I'm invisible to the world. You know, I'm passed by basically by the world in general. Most of us, when we get to the mid-70s or older, start to think the same thing, you know?
Unless you're on television, no.
Yeah. So this one I wrote because I remember as a child loving to see the skywriters up there and marveling at how they could, you know, do a form or a message.
Spell things out.
Yeah. And so now the photo that goes with this thing is one of those, what do they call it, lunar moths.
Yes.
Which I have only seen this moth once in my life, in 75 years. I don't think that you see them very often.
Was this your photograph?
It's my photograph.
Okay.
These are all my photographs,
yep.
yeah. This one, we came home late one night, and it was perched on the door where we come in. Just beautiful. And I didn't even know what it was at the time. I had to look it up. But I've asked around, and it's not like it's near extinct, but you don't see them very often. And I've talked to several other people. Well, I think I've seen it maybe once or twice in my life, you know. Now, there's probably there's somebody out there saying, I see these things all the time. But anyway, to me, it was unique and beautiful. And so I use it as the picture because it's almost looks like it's flying a little bit. Right. And the caption is, "The world moves too fast to mourn the past. We leave that to those who have been left behind." Skywriter. He climbed slowly into the weathered biplane, whispering to it in the late afternoon cold. The engine coughed a tired greeting, then settled into a rhythmic beat that carried them into an azure sky. The heavens were his canvas, his brush the noisy antique that carried him. For decades he painted in shapes and words, fighting the vagaries of wind and cloud, viewed by millions watching in anticipation. But the world had moved on. The audience looked to other canvases. Clouds captured in boxes had conquered blue sky. Words hid in their own vapor trails, and people looked in instead of up. They circled beneath unseen stars, searching in the fading light for a place where they could come to rest, where messages were still floated in bottles and words were still written on the wind.
I'm wondering if the clouds in boxes and instead of, is that television?
It's computers, you know.
Oh, computers.
The cloud,
okay. Oh, that's
it's a
true.
reference
Absolutely. Very good.
To the cloud
okay.
where
You're
they're
ahead of me.
storing
Okay, great.
everything now. The whole world is in the cloud.
I open a Word document. Why do I have to wait? Oh, it's in the cloud. It's
Yeah,
you know, there you go.
So the boxes could be the
Got it.
computer you're looking at.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. That makes sense. Okay. And again, the passing of mediums, the development, changing of time. I really like that. One thing that really impressed me was the way the photographs, as I mentioned earlier, lead you into the poems if you have a question about them, or if you read the poem and you need it expanded. Sometimes the photograph can lead you into different meanings, and I thought they were very well chosen and very interesting to see. They really helped me as a reader make the poem, some of the poems, more comfortable and accessible. So I enjoyed seeing those as part of it. Our final poem, we're kind of running out of time, is a poem called Winter. Is that right? It's on,
That's correct,
on page 95 that we'd like to see.
It's the penultimate poem in the book.
It had a word I had to look up in it, but I like that, so that was good. Along with penultimate, no.
Yes, for this one, the photo I took is, I set it up so that I actually had somebody at the end of the covered bridge.
Oh, okay.
But fading, so you couldn't recognize what it was.
Which is what you wanted. Yes,
The
yeah.
light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
And it's the railroad bridge over in, not Hopkinton, but Kentucky.
Kentucky, yeah.
Yeah. And the caption under it is, "Winter comes to all of us. Sometimes it rides on a white horse accompanied by an Arctic wind. Sometimes it builds black ice beneath us and takes us before we realize we're gone. It is the last hour of the day when storms surprise the unwary. Sleep disarms the countryside and the land hides from itself. Bottomless cold burns the air, converting flakes into schools of sparks, pursued by a black-scythed wind that sends them into panicked flight. In the gray-lit woods, the fallen gather, each layer an ashen shroud. Wails of pines and whispers of shifting sculptures fight a silence that smothers the forest. Paths so familiar for years have lost their way. The fine snow, driven hard, encircles and wears me down. I shelter in the lee of a large fir, no longer fighting the chill of winter. There is only the land drawing me in as the minutes and seconds drift away."
The two things that grab me about this was there's a force of natural elements, and they seem to be crossing, or the prominence of the time or the ebbing time of life takes over
Exactly.
that
Yeah,
as
exactly.
it goes along. And I think for the viewer of this program, along with the reader of the book, will see that during the duration of the program and the duration of the book, there's a richness that comes into the poems, and they sort of develop just a strength and power that actually took me by surprise, I must say. Not that I didn't expect it, but as a collection, it really does expand as you read as a piece.
Well,
And,
as
you
we
know,
get older,
yeah.
we see more things, we've felt a lot more things, we understand more things. Nobody cares. You know?
And the poem about the old man, which I actually read to my brother on the phone last night because it was so funny and so apt, I think encapsulates that, you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, we grow wise, but you
yeah.
know.
Glenn and I could talk all afternoon about this book, and I just, I can't really, I'm not allowed to say more than that about it, but the book is available. It's called Ball of String by Glenn Currie, and it's available at Gibson's, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And probably Toadstools if you're out
Toadstools,
there.
and-
But I really want people to go onto Glenn's website, and you find many, many things that are of interest about your work and your life, and the way you look at writing, and the way you understand writing, and the light you shine on that is equally helpful.
Well, I'm glad to hear you like the website.
Yes,
So we just totally revamped the
Okay, yep.
website
Well worth the time.
about 6 months ago.
Good, yeah. And it's, I don't know if you put that on the screen, it's www.snapscreenpress.org. So there we go. Okay, thank you very much. We have to wrap up. We have to say goodbye, and thank you so much to Glenn Currie for coming in to talk to us today on Community Conversations. It's been great to meet you, and this is a book I will be going back to, I know that. So
Well, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be
Pleasure
here.
to meet you. Thank you so much, Glenn.